Tonight, the fire burns low beneath the stars of Middle-earth. The roads are quiet. The great wars are over. The ring has been destroyed. Yet every hero carries memories that few ever hear about. Before Aragorn became King Elessar, before he led the dead through the paths of the dead, before Helm's Deep, Minas Tirith, or the Black Gate, he lived another life. A life under another name. If you enjoy these quiet journeys through the history and lore of Tolkien's world, consider leaving a like and subscribing. It truly helps the channel and lets me continue sharing these stories beside the campfire. Now, settle into your blanket, listen to the crackling fire, and let us travel back to a time when the heir of Isildur wandered the world as a young ranger known only as Thorongil. The fire crackled softly between them. Tiny sparks drifted upward into the dark sky before disappearing among countless stars. Aragorn rested both hands upon the pommel of his sword. For a long while, he simply watched the flames. Their worn light danced across his weathered face, revealing lines carved there by years of wandering rather than by age alone. When he finally spoke, his voice was quiet, almost thoughtful. "There are many parts of my life," he said, "that few now remember." The hobbits sitting nearby listened without interrupting. They had learned that Aragorn rarely spoke of himself unless the night was long and the road was peaceful. "Most know me as Strider." A faint smile appeared. Others remember the name Elessar. The Dunedain knew me as Chieftain. But long before any of those names, I lived as Thorongil. The wind moved gently through the trees. Somewhere beyond the firelight, an owl called into the darkness. It means Eagle of the Star, a name given to me because my own could not yet be spoken. For Aragorn had not always been free to reveal who he truly was. He had been born Aragorn, son of Arathorn, the last direct heir of Isildur, a child whose blood carried the forgotten line of the kings of Arnor and Gondor. That blood also made him a target. When Aragorn was only 2 years old, his father fell beneath the arrows of orcs. His mother, Gilrain, understood the danger immediately. If the servants of the enemy learned that Isildur's heir still lived, they would hunt him without mercy. So she carried her son north, far from the lands of men, far from Gondor, to the hidden valley of Rivendell. There, Lord Elrond welcomed them. Within that peaceful refuge, the young boy grew beneath the care of elves. Yet even there, his true name remained secret. Few knew who he really was. To protect him, Elrond gave the child another name. Estel, Hope. It was a fitting choice. For at that time, hope was perhaps the rarest thing left among the descendants of Numenor. Aragorn often remembered Rivendell with quiet affection. Its waterfalls, its gardens, the sound of elven songs drifting through the evening air. Unlike the noisy courts of kings, Rivendell possessed an almost timeless peace. The seasons passed gently there. Years seemed softer somehow. Elrond became more than a guardian. He became a teacher. From him, Aragorn learned history, languages, healing, the wisdom of ancient kings, the old lore of Numenor. He trained beside the sons of Elrond, Ella, Dan, and Elrohir, both fierce warriors, both patient instructors. Under their guidance, he learned to wield sword, spear, bow, and knife. But Elrond taught another lesson as well, A king must understand far more than war. He must know the hearts of those he leads. He must recognize suffering. He must understand mercy. These lessons would remain with Aragorn far longer than any skill with a blade. For many years, the young man knew only that his father had died bravely, nothing more. Only when Aragorn reached the age of 20 did Elrond finally reveal the truth. He brought forth the Ring of Barahir, the shards of Narsil, the ancient treasures of his house, and with them, the history of his people. Aragorn learned that he was no ordinary ranger. He was the 16th chieftain of the Dunedain, the last heir of Isildur, the man who, if fate allowed, might one day reclaim the throne that had stood empty for nearly 1,000 years. It was a burden almost impossible to imagine. Few young men would have welcomed such knowledge. Aragorn accepted it quietly, not because he desired power, but because he understood duty. Soon afterward came another moment that would shape the course of his entire life. Walking through the woods of Rivendell, he saw a young elven woman beneath the trees. At first he believed she was Luthien herself, returned from the Elder Days. So great was her beauty. The woman smiled. It was Arwen Undumil, the daughter of Elrond. Their meeting became one of the great love stories of the Third Age. Yet, even love demanded patience. Elrond made his position perfectly clear. Aragorn would not marry Arwen simply because he loved her. He must first become worthy of her. He must prove himself, not as a wandering ranger, not merely as the heir of forgotten kings, but as the king himself. Only then would Elrond give his blessing. For many men, such a task would have seemed impossible. Aragorn did not argue. He simply prepared to leave. For wisdom learned within Rivendell could only carry a man so far. The world beyond its hidden valley remained dangerous. Broken kingdoms still struggled against darkness. Ordinary people needed protectors, even if they never knew their names. So Aragorn departed. He wandered first with the Rangers of the North, guarding lonely roads, protecting villages that never realized who watched over them, driving orcs back into the wilderness, sleeping beneath ruined watchtowers once raised by the kings of Arnor. The years passed quietly. He learned every forest path, every forgotten trail, every mountain pass. He came to know hardship not from books, but through experience. Rain became a familiar companion, so did hunger. Cold nights beneath the stars, long miles walked alone, yet every journey taught him something new. The greatest kings, he slowly discovered, were not those who spent their lives upon thrones. They were those who first understood the lives of ordinary people. Only after years of wandering did Aragorn make another important decision. The North had shaped him. Now he wished to see the South. Few living men remembered Gondor as it had once been. The kingdom remained mighty, but age had begun to weigh upon it. Its borders were constantly tested. Its people looked for leaders worthy of the old Númenórean kings. Aragorn knew he could not simply ride into Minas Tirith announcing himself as Isildur's heir. The time was not yet right. His bloodline had to remain hidden. Once again, he would need another name. He chose one that few had ever heard before. Thorongil, the Eagle of the Star. A name that would one day become respected across Gondor. a name whispered with admiration by soldiers, a name remembered by one steward long after its owner had quietly disappeared. And beside that campfire, Aragorn looked once more into the flames. "They never knew who I truly was," he said softly. "Perhaps that was for the best." The fire crackled gently. Above them, the stars of Elbereth shone over Middle-earth. And somewhere beyond the darkness, the White City waited. Soon, a young ranger calling himself Thorongil would ride through his great gates and begin the most remarkable chapter of his hidden life. The fire had settled into a quieter glow. Most of the flames were gone now, leaving only red embers beneath blackened wood. Aragorn reached forward with a broken branch and gently stirred the coals. A few sparks rose into the night. For a moment, his eyes followed them. Then he continued. "My road did not lead first to Gondor." His voice was low enough that the others leaned a little closer. "Before I entered the service of the steward, I rode among the horse lords of Rohan. At that time, Rohan was ruled by King Thengel. The Rittermark stretched across broad green plains beneath the northern slopes of the White Mountains. To a traveler descending from the Misty Mountains, it seemed like a land without walls. The sky reached farther there. The wind moved freely across open grass. Herds of horses grazed beside clear streams, watched by riders whose families had lived in the saddle for generations. Aragorn had already crossed many lands. None felt quite like Rohan. In the north, the rangers moved unseen through forests, ruins, and lonely hills. In Rohan, concealment held little value. A rider was judged openly by the steadiness of his hands, by the care he showed his horse, by the courage he displayed when danger appeared upon the horizon. These were a proud people, but their pride was not empty. They lived close to the earth, and closer still to the animals that carried them through both peace and war. Aragorn entered their lands without title or herald. He wore the weathered clothes of a northern wanderer. His sword remained hidden beneath a plain cloak. Few would have guessed that the stranger riding toward Edoras carried the blood of Isildur. That was exactly as he intended. A man learns little of a kingdom when everyone knows he may one day rule it. Doors open too easily. Words become carefully chosen. Truth hides behind courtesy. Thorongil wished to see the world as it truly was, not as noblemen wished a prince to see it. His first days among the Rohirrim were quiet. He listened to their language, observed their customs, shared meals within timber halls where shields hung above the hearth and old songs were remembered long after their singers had died. The language of the Mark had a strength he admired. Its words seemed made for wind, horses, and open fields. Before long, he spoke it fluently. The Rohirrim respected that effort. Many visitors expected them to abandon their own speech in favor of the common tongue. Thorongil did the opposite. He entered their world without demanding they reshape it for his comfort. That alone earned him goodwill. His skill with horses earned much more. He had learned to ride in Rivendell and later among the Rangers, but Rohan taught him a deeper understanding. A horse was not simply a means of travel. It was a companion whose fear, fatigue, and courage had to be respected. The finest riders did not dominate their mounts. They listened to them. Thorongil listened well. Even difficult horses grew calm beneath his hand. Stable masters began watching him with interest. Young riders challenged him during exercises. He rarely refused. He also rarely lost. Still, he took no pleasure in embarrassing them. When a rider made a mistake, Thorongil quietly explained how it might be corrected. He offered advice without sounding superior. That was another quality the Rohirrim respected. A proud warrior might win admiration for a day. A patient one could earn loyalty for years. King Thengel soon heard of the northern stranger. The king himself had spent many years in Gondor before returning to claim the throne of Rohan. He understood that wisdom sometimes arrived from unexpected places. When Thorongil appeared before him, Thengel did not ask first about lineage. He asked about the road. What dangers had the stranger seen? Where had orcs gathered? Which mountain passes remained safe? What news came from Gondor and the north? Thorongil answered carefully. He concealed his name. He did not conceal the truth. The king recognized immediately that this was no ordinary wanderer. His knowledge was too broad, his speech too refined, his bearing too calm. Yet Thengel did not force the matter. In troubled times, a useful man did not always need to reveal every secret. Thorongil entered the king's service. At first, he acted as a scout. The work suited him. He rode along the western borders, where Dunlendings sometimes crossed into the Mark. He watched the approaches to Fangorn. He traveled beneath the shadow of the misty mountains, searching for signs of orcs descending into the plains. Often he disappeared for weeks. When he returned, he brought precise reports. Not rumors, not exaggerated stories. Numbers, tracks, distances, the likely direction of enemy movement. The Rohirrim soon discovered that Thorongil never claimed certainty where none existed. When he did not know something, he said so. When he offered a warning, wise captains listened. His first battles in Rohan were small. No songs remember them. A raid against an isolated settlement, a group of orcs descending from the mountains, wolves troubling herds during a bitter winter. Such conflicts rarely found their way into royal chronicles. Yet to the families who lived in those remote places, they mattered more than the wars of distant kings. Thorongil fought beside ordinary riders. He slept beneath the same rough blankets, ate the same plain food, endured the same rain. When danger came, he did not remain safely behind the line. He rode at the front, not recklessly, never for display. He simply believed a captain should face the risks he asked others to accept. That belief earned him the affection of the men who served beside him. They began calling him the Eagle of the Star. Some believe the name came from the silver star he wore upon his cloak. Others said he watched the land with the far sight of a great bird circling high above the plains. Thorongil never explained. Over time, King Thengel entrusted him with greater responsibility. He led longer patrols, advised commanders, helped strengthen isolated defenses before winter. He learned the ancient relationship between Gondor and Rohan, the oaths sworn between Sirion and Eorl, the gift of Calenardhon, the promise that each kingdom would answer when the other called. To Thorongil, that friendship represented something precious. Men of different histories had chosen trust over suspicion. The alliance had survived because ordinary people continued honoring a promise made by ancestors they had never met. There was wisdom in that. One evening, Thorongil rode alone to a hill overlooking the plains. The sun was setting behind the white mountains. Its final light turned the grass to gold. Far below, riders guided horses toward their evening shelter. Smoke rose from distant homes. Nothing about the scene appeared grand, yet he remembered it for the rest of his life. A kingdom, he realized, did not truly consist of its king, nor its borders, nor the banners carried into war. A kingdom was the shepherd returning before darkness, the child waiting beside the doorway, the old woman tending a small fire, the rider watching from a distant hill so they could sleep without fear. Years later, when Aragorn called the Rohirrim to stand beside Gondor, he remembered those evenings. He did not think of them as foreign allies. He remembered friends, men whose language he had spoken, whose bread he had shared, whose dead he had helped bury beneath the green earth. Beside the campfire, Aragorn became silent again. The breeze shifted. Smoke moved gently between the listeners before disappearing into the trees. "Did they know?" one of the hobbits asked softly. "Who you were?" Aragorn smiled. "Some suspected I carried more names than I offered." His gaze returned to the embers. King Thengel was a wise man. He asked no question whose answer might place another in danger. There was gratitude in his voice, the kind reserved for those long gone. Thorongil might have remained in Rohan for many more years. The king valued him, the riders trusted him. The plains had become almost another home, but he had never begun his journey in search of comfort. Beyond the White Mountains stood another kingdom, older than Rohan, greater in memory, and far closer to the shadow. Gondor. Reports from the south had grown troubling. The Corsairs of Umbar threatened the coasts. Servants of Mordor moved quietly beyond the Anduin. The kingdom still possessed strength, but its enemies had begun testing that strength more boldly. Thorongil understood that his road now led there. When the time came to leave, no great ceremony was held. He had arrived without announcement. He departed much the same way. King Thengel offered him gifts. Thorongil accepted only a good horse and provisions for the road. The riders who had served beside him gathered outside Edoras before dawn. No one spoke of farewell as though it were final. Warriors rarely do. They clasped forearms, exchanged quiet words. Then the northern captain rode toward the mountains. The road south crossed beneath cold peaks and through valleys where the wind carried the scent of pine. Beyond them waited the lands of Gondor, the realm his ancestors had once helped to found. Yet he would not enter as an heir. He would not demand recognition. He would arrive as a soldier, seeking service. A nameless captain from the north. The White City knew nothing of his coming. Neither did Ecthelion, the steward who governed beneath an empty throne. And among the steward's household was a proud young man named Denethor, wise, watchful, already suspicious of those whose true purposes remained hidden. Thorongil had found friendship in Rohan. In Gondor, he would find admiration, victory, and the first quiet shadow of a rivalry that neither man would ever entirely forget. For a little while, only the sound of the fire could be heard. The flames rose and settled again, casting long shadows across the quiet camp. Aragorn smiled faintly. I remember my first sight of Minas Tirith. It looked almost unreal. I had seen many strongholds before then, the ruins of Annúminas, the hidden valley of Rivendell, the golden hall of Mediseld, but nothing prepared me for the White City. Long before sunrise, Thorongil had climbed the final ridge overlooking the Pelennor Fields. Morning mist still rested upon the Anduin. Beyond it, rising from the shoulder of Mount Mindolin, stood 7 shining levels of white stone. Each wall climbed higher than the last. Each gate faced a different direction. From afar, the city resembled a mountain carved by human hands. At its summit stood the Tower of Ecthelion, gleaming in the first light of dawn. The white banner of the stewards fluttered gently above it. No royal standard flew there. For nearly 1,000 years, the throne had remained empty. The stewards ruled faithfully in the name of kings who never returned. Thorongil watched the city for a long while before descending toward its gates. He wondered what his own ancestors might have felt when they first entered Minas Tirith centuries earlier. Would they recognize it now? Would they mourn what had been lost? Or would they take comfort in the knowledge that Gondor still endured? The guards at the great gate studied the stranger with quiet curiosity. He wore no noble colors, no rich cloak. His armor bore the marks of long travel. Yet there was something about the northern captain that immediately commanded respect. He carried himself with calm confidence, not arrogance, not pride. Simply the quiet certainty of a man who knew exactly who he was, even if no one else did. Within the city, Thorongil found streets alive with merchants, craftsmen, soldiers, and children. Smiths hammered glowing iron in open workshops. The scent of fresh bread drifted through narrow lanes. Messengers hurried between the different levels carrying orders from the citadel. Life continued much as it had for generations, yet beneath that ordinary rhythm lingered an unspoken concern. The shadow was growing. The eastern borders remained under constant threat. The Corsairs of Umbar struck the southern coast whenever opportunity allowed. A watch upon Mordor never truly ended. Gondor remained mighty, but it was no longer at the height of its strength. Thorongil soon entered the service of Steward Ecthelion II. The old steward possessed sharp eyes and a thoughtful mind. Unlike many rulers, he judged men by ability rather than appearance. Reports from Rohan had already reached Minas Tirith. The mysterious northern captain had earned respect among King Thengel's riders. Now, Ecthelion wished to judge the man himself. Their first meeting was simple. The steward asked questions. Thorongil answered honestly. He spoke of the lands he had crossed, the dangers beyond the northern wilderness, the habits of orcs, the movements of wild men, the importance of maintaining strong friendships between Gondor and Rohan. Never once did he mention his true heritage. He did not need to. His wisdom spoke loudly enough. Within weeks, Thorongil had become one of the steward's trusted officers. His rise surprised many older captains. Some had served Gondor for decades. Yet this quiet stranger from the north quickly earned responsibilities usually reserved for experienced commanders. Not through politics, not through flattery, but because every assignment he accepted ended in success. He possessed a gift for seeing what others overlooked. Before sending soldiers into dangerous country, he insisted upon careful scouting. He studied maps long into the night. He listened to local villagers before making decisions. Many victories were won before the first sword ever left its scabbard. The soldiers admired that. Thorongil never wasted lives merely to appear bold. If patience offered a better path than glory, he chose patience, again and again. The steward noticed. Soon, Thorongil became more than merely another captain. He became an advisor. His opinions carried weight within the citadel. When Ecthelion sought counsel regarding military matters, the Northern Ranger was often present. Not everyone welcomed his growing influence. Among those who observed him carefully was the steward's son, Denethor. Young, intelligent, and exceptionally perceptive. Few men understood Gondor better than Denethor. He recognized talent immediately. He also recognized secrets. Thorongil troubled him. The captain spoke several ancient languages with unusual ease. He understood the customs of Numenor better than many scholars. His manners resembled those of the old nobility, despite his humble appearance. His knowledge seemed impossible. Denethor began asking quiet questions. Where had Thorongil truly come from? Who had trained him? Why did no family claim him? No satisfying answers appeared. The mystery only deepened. Thorongil noticed the steward's curiosity. Yet he bore no resentment toward Denethor. Had their positions been reversed, he might have asked the same questions. Trust, after all, should never be given lightly, especially in uncertain times. Still, their relationship remained respectful. They served the same kingdom, shared the same purpose. Only later would history remember them as rivals. During those peaceful years, they worked side by side more often than many realize. Outside Minas Tirith, the threats facing Gondor continued to grow. Along the eastern frontier, orcs tested the defenses of Ecthelion. To the south, Haradrim raiders crossed the Poros. Most dangerous of all were the Corsairs of Umbar. Their black ships appeared without warning along Gondor's southern coast. Villages burned, merchant vessels disappeared. The sea itself had become an enemy. Thorongil volunteered for nearly every difficult assignment. He rode with the rangers of Ecthelion. He strengthened isolated forts. He trained younger officers who lacked experience against the enemy. His soldiers quickly learned that their captain demanded discipline first from himself. He slept no more comfortably than they did. He accepted no special privileges. If food ran short, everyone shared equally. Such things mattered, not because they won battles, but because they earned trust. Years later, veterans who had served beneath Thorongil still remembered the quiet confidence he inspired. He never shouted unless absolutely necessary. He praised good work openly, corrected mistakes privately. He knew every officer by name. Many ordinary soldiers believed he remembered them as well. Perhaps he did, for Aragorn possessed a remarkable memory throughout his life. Beside the campfire, he looked toward the darkness beyond the trees. I loved Gondor. The words came softly. It was my people's greatest work. I walked streets my ancestors had helped build. I stood upon walls they had defended. And every day, I wished I could tell them who I truly was. He fell silent. The flames reflected within his eyes. But the time was not yet come. Instead, Thorongil remained what Gondor believed him to be, a mysterious captain from the north. Faithful, wise, fearless in battle, unknown in birth. Soon, however, an opportunity would arise that would make his name famous throughout the kingdom. Far to the south, beyond Belfalas, the black sails of Umbar were gathering, and Thorongil was about to lead the most daring mission of his hidden life. For a few moments, Aragorn watched the embers in silence. One log shifted within the fire, sending a shower of sparks into the cool night air. They say, he said at last, that a kingdom is tested not during years of peace, when danger comes from every direction at once. Gondor was such a kingdom. Although the White City stood proud beneath Mount Mindolin, its greatest threat no longer came only from the east. Far to the south, beyond the mouths of the Anduin, lay the ancient haven of Umbar. Once, long ago, Umbar had belonged to faithful of Numenor. Its great harbor had welcomed the ships of the Sea Kings. Tall towers overlooked calm waters where proud vessels anchored beneath the banners of Westernesse. But centuries had changed everything. After the downfall of Numenor and the long struggles that followed, Umbar fell into the hands of the king's men, those who had rejected the old friendship with the elves. In time, it became the greatest refuge of Gondor's enemies. Its captains grew rich through piracy, its harbors filled with black-holed warships. Its sailors knew every current and hidden inlet along Gondor's southern coast. Again and again, the Corsairs struck without warning. Fishing villages burned before sunrise. Merchant ships vanished beyond the horizon. Entire harvests were lost when supplies failed to arrive. The people of Gondor had learned to fear the appearance of black sails. Many believed Umbar could never truly be defeated. Its harbor was heavily defended, its fleet enormous. Any attack by sea would almost certainly fail. Most captains therefore chose caution. Thorongil chose something else. He chose surprise. The idea was astonishingly simple. Instead of waiting for the Corsairs to attack Gondor, Gondor would strike first. Not with a great invasion, not with a slow-moving fleet, but with a small force sailing swiftly beneath cover of darkness. When Thorongil first presented the plan before Steward Ecthelion, many experienced commanders doubted it. The risks seemed overwhelming. If discovered, every ship would be trapped inside Umbar's harbor. Retreat would become impossible. The loss would strengthen the Corsairs even further. Thorongil listened patiently to every objection. Then he answered each one. He had studied the tides, the winds, the patrol routes, the layout of the harbor itself. Nothing about the expedition relied upon luck, only careful preparation. Steward Ecthelion considered the proposal for several days. Finally, he agreed. The northern captain received command. Only a handful of trusted officers knew the full purpose of the voyage. The fleet departed quietly. No great farewell marked their departure. The people of Minas Tirith scarcely noticed the ships slipping down the Anduin toward the sea. Their destination remained secret. Even the sailors knew only enough to perform their duties. Thorongil preferred it that way. Secrets survived longest when shared with the fewest people. For several days, the ships sailed south beneath favorable winds. The coast of Gondor slowly disappeared behind them. The sea stretched endlessly beneath clear skies. At night, the stars guided their course, just as they had guided Númenórean captains thousands of years before. Thorongil spent much of each evening standing alone near the bow, watching, thinking, waiting. He had learned long ago that patience often won battles more effectively than speed. At last, the towers of Umbar appeared upon the horizon. Even from a distance, the harbor impressed every sailor aboard. Dozens of warships rested safely behind massive stone breakwaters. Watchtowers overlooked every approach. Signal fires waited upon the cliffs. It appeared almost impossible to surprise. Almost. Thorongil waited until darkness settled completely across the sea. Clouds covered the moon. The harbor lights reflected softly upon calm water. One by one, the Gondorian ships entered the bay. No horns sounded, no drums beat. Only the gentle splash of oars disturbed the silence. The first guards realized something was wrong only when Gondorian soldiers were already climbing onto the docks. Then came the alarm. Shouts echoed across the harbor. Bells rang wildly. Men rushed toward their ships. Too late. Thorongil's soldiers spread quickly through the harbor, carrying torches prepared long before the attack. Within moments, the first Corsair vessel caught fire. Then another. Then another. Dry timber burned with frightening speed. Flames climbed masts. Sails collapsed into burning heaps. The night sky turned orange as fire spread from ship to ship. Captains shouted impossible orders while sailors desperately tried to cut anchor lines before the flames reached them. Many never escaped. Smoke rolled across the harbor until even the stars disappeared behind it. Thorongil moved calmly through the chaos. He did not waste time pursuing fleeing enemies. His objective had never been conquest. It had been destruction. Destroy the fleet. Leave before the enemy could recover. Everything unfolded almost exactly as planned. Before dawn, the Gondorian force had already withdrawn from the harbor. Behind them, Umbar burned. Much of the Corsair fleet had been destroyed where it lay anchored. The greatest naval threat facing Gondor had suffered a blow from which he would take many years to recover. The victory echoed across the kingdom. Messengers reached Minas Tirith before the returning ships themselves. When Thorongil finally rode once more through the Great Gate, crowds gathered along the streets to welcome him. Children climbed onto barrels for a better view. Soldiers cheered openly. Merchants closed their shops long enough to watch the mysterious captain pass. Steward Ecthelion received him with genuine warmth. The old ruler understood the importance of what had been accomplished. Not only had Gondor won a victory, its people had recovered something they had nearly forgotten: confidence. For the first time in many years, the Corsairs feared Gondor more than Gondor feared the Corsairs. Thorongil's name became known throughout the realm. Songs began to appear. Stories grew larger with every retelling. Some claimed he had fought a dozen Corsair captains single-handed. Others insisted he had planned the entire attack after only one glance at the harbor. Thorongil never corrected the exaggerations, nor did he encourage them. He simply returned to his duties as though nothing extraordinary had happened. But one man watched these celebrations with quieter thoughts: Denethor. He admired Thorongil's success. No honest man could deny its brilliance. Yet each new victory strengthened the captain's reputation. The people praised him. The soldiers trusted him. Even the steward increasingly sought his advice. Denethor could not shake the feeling that the mysterious northerner carried a destiny larger than anyone yet understood. He was right, far more right than he realized. Beside the fire, Aragorn smiled, almost sadly. I never sought glory. He looked toward the distant stars. I sought only to leave Gondor stronger than I had found it. The flames crackled softly. But every road must eventually lead home. For the years of Thorongil were drawing to their end. Without warning, without farewell, the mysterious captain, who had become one of Gondor's greatest heroes, would soon vanish as quietly as he had first appeared. And he would leave behind one question that Steward Ecthelion, and especially Denethor, would never stop asking: who had Thorongil truly been? For a long moment, Aragorn did not speak. The campfire had burned low now, its bright flames giving way to glowing embers that pulsed gently in the darkness. The night had grown colder. Somewhere in the distance, water flowed quietly over smooth stones. "It is a strange thing," Aragorn said at last, "to become known for a name that was never truly yours." He smiled faintly. Yet, perhaps, Thorongil became as real as Aragorn. After the victory at Umbar, Thorongil's reputation spread farther than ever before. Travelers carried stories from Minas Tirith to Dol Amroth. Merchants repeated them in the markets of Pelegir. Even distant villages spoke of the mysterious northern captain who had crippled the Corsair fleet in a single daring raid. Many believed greater honors surely awaited him. Some expected Steward Ecthelion to name Thorongil commander of all Gondor's armies. Others quietly wondered whether the mysterious captain might someday become steward himself. The old ruler trusted him completely. Whenever difficult questions arose, Thorongil's advice was often sought before anyone else's. It was an extraordinary position for a man whose true birthplace remained unknown. Ecthelion valued wisdom above pride. He cared little whether a man came from a noble house or a lonely village. If he served Gondor faithfully, he earned the steward's respect. Thorongil had earned it many times over. Not everyone found comfort in that growing influence. Thor watched carefully. He admired Thorongil's ability. That much was true. He respected courage wherever he found it. But admiration and trust are not always the same thing. The more Thorongil accomplished, the more mysterious he became. How could one man possess such knowledge? He spoke Sindarin with the ease of an elf. He understood forgotten Númenorian customs. He knew the wilderness better than seasoned rangers. He advised commanders, healers, diplomats, and scouts with equal confidence. No ordinary soldier learned such things. Denethor quietly gathered information. Messengers were questioned, travelers interviewed, old records examined. Very little emerged. Thorongil seemed almost to have appeared from nowhere. The mystery itself became unsettling. Years later, some believed Denethor had guessed part of the truth. Not the whole truth, but enough. Enough to understand that the northern captain carried blood far greater than he admitted. Whether he suspected the line of Isildur, no one can say. If he did, he never spoke of it openly. Thorongil himself sensed the growing curiosity. He noticed the careful questions, the thoughtful glances, the conversations that stopped when he entered a room. None of it angered him. Secrets rarely remain hidden forever. He had always known that. The years in Gondor had given him something far more valuable than military victories. They had shown him what it truly meant to govern. He watched Ecthelion settle disputes between noble families. He observed how grain was distributed during poor harvests. He learned how roads, harbors, and watchtowers were maintained across a vast kingdom. War had taught him courage. Gondor taught him responsibility. A ruler, he discovered, spent far more time preventing suffering than winning glory. Those lessons remained with him for the rest of his life. Sometimes he climbed alone to the highest walls of Minas Tirith after sunset. From there he could see the silver ribbon of the Anduin winding toward the sea. The Pelennor Fields stretched peacefully below. Farmhouses glowed with warm candlelight. Beyond them, far beyond them, lay Mordor. Even at such a distance, the darkness seemed to linger upon the eastern horizon. Thorongil often stood there until long after midnight. He knew the shadow had not been defeated, only delayed. One victory against the Corsairs could not change that, nor could 100 victories. The greater struggle still awaited. Perhaps that knowledge made his decision easier. One spring morning, without warning, Thorongil requested a private audience with Steward Ecthelion. The old steward welcomed him warmly. He expected another military proposal, another campaign. Instead, Thorongil asked permission to leave Gondor. The request came as a genuine surprise. Ecthelion offered promotions, greater command, higher honors. Thorongil declined them all. He thanked the steward for his trust, for his friendship, for allowing a nameless ranger to serve a kingdom that was not yet his own. But he explained that other roads now called him. The realm still needed watchmen beyond its borders. There were lands few Gondorians had ever seen. These gathering in places no army yet guarded. His work was unfinished. The steward accepted the decision with visible sadness. He did not attempt to imprison Thorongil with promises of power. Great men, he understood, could never be kept by titles alone. Before they parted, Ecthelion is said to have spoken words remembered for many years. He told Thorongil that if ever he wished to return, Gondor would always welcome him. Aragorn paused beside the fire. Ecthelion was a good man. I often wished he had lived long enough to see the truth. No grand farewell marked Thorongil's departure. There was no parade through the White City, no celebration. At dawn, he saddled his horse. A handful of soldiers gathered quietly outside the gates, men who had fought beside him. Some embraced him. Others clasped his forearm in silence. Warriors often understand that words are unnecessary. Then Thorongil rode north. The White City slowly disappeared behind him. Its shining walls faded into the morning mist. Few realized they were watching one of Gondor's greatest captains for the last time. Years passed. Rumors occasionally appeared. Some claimed Thorongil had entered the distant east. Others believed he hunted servants of the enemy in the wild lands beyond Mirkwood. A few insisted he had perished somewhere beyond the Sea of Rhûn. None knew the truth. The Thorongil had become a story, a mystery carried by travelers from one tavern to another. Meanwhile, Aragorn continued the long road that destiny had prepared for him. He wandered through lands few people ever visited. He rode beside the sons of Elrond. He hunted creatures that ordinary folk never even realized existed. He met Gandalf often. The wizard had watched the young heir of Isildur grow from childhood into manhood. Now he watched something even more remarkable. A king being shaped, not by a crown, but by experience. Each year added another lesson. Each hardship another measure of wisdom. Aragorn never regretted leaving Gondor. Had he remained, perhaps he would have become a celebrated captain, perhaps even the greatest general of the age, but he would never have become the man Middle-earth truly needed. The fire crackled softly. Above them, the stars wheeled silently across the heavens. I often wondered, Aragorn admitted quietly, whether anyone in Gondor still remembered Thorongil. A gentle smile crossed his face. When I entered Minas Tirith again during the War of the Ring, I discovered they had never forgotten. For although the mysterious captain had vanished decades earlier, his deeds still lived in the memories of old soldiers. His name still echoed through the halls of the White City. They simply never imagined that Thorongil had finally returned. Only now he carried his true name. The campfire had become little more than a circle of glowing coals. The warmth still lingered, but the night had grown deep and quiet. The hobbits sat without speaking. They knew Aragorn had reached the end of his story. For a while, he simply looked toward the stars. When people speak of kings, he said softly, they often imagine crowns. They imagine great halls. They imagine power. He smiled to himself, but no crown ever taught a man how to rule. His thoughts drifted far away, back to forgotten roads, lonely watchtowers, the plains of Rohan, the shining streets of Minas Tirith, the hidden paths of the north. Each had left its mark upon him. Looking back across the long years, Aragorn realized that no single place had shaped him. It had been the journey itself. In Rivendell, Elrond had taught him wisdom. Among the Rangers, he learned endurance. In Rohan, he discovered loyalty. In Gondor, responsibility. Each lesson had prepared him for a future he could not yet see. Many years after Thorongil disappeared, Gandalf once spoke quietly with him beside another fire. The old wizard had watched kingdoms rise and fall. He knew that true rulers were never made in palaces alone. You have seen more of Middle-earth than most things ever shall, Gandalf had said. Never forget what you have learned. Aragorn never did. When he traveled through the wild, he remembered the lonely farmers of the north. When he entered great cities, he remembered the bustling streets of Minas Tirith. When he rode beside the Rohirrim, he remembered the wide green plains where he had first learned their language. Every kingdom became part of him. Perhaps that was why so many different peoples later accepted him. The elves trusted him, the Dunedain followed him, the riders of Rohan welcomed him as an old friend. The people of Gondor saw not a stranger, but a captain they had once admired. Even before they knew his true name, many wondered why Aragorn never attempted to claim the throne during his years as Thorongil. The answer was simpler than most expected. The time was wrong. A crown claimed too early would divide the realm. Steward Ecthelion still ruled wisely. The people were not prepared. Nor was Aragorn himself. He understood that inheritance alone never made a king. A man first had to become worthy of the throne he hoped to occupy. That lesson required decades. Not months, not years, decades. So he waited, patiently. He walked roads that few princes would willingly travel. He shared meals with shepherds. He guarded merchants who never learned his name. He hunted orcs through frozen wilderness. He slept beneath rain-soaked cloaks while ancient palaces stood empty, waiting for their rightful king. He never complained, not once, because none of those years were wasted. Every hardship became another stone laid upon the foundation of the man he would one day become. Then came the day that changed everything. In a quiet corner of the Shire, outside an ordinary inn called the Prancing Pony, a frightened hobbit noticed a weathered ranger sitting alone in the shadows. His clothes were worn, his boots carried the dust of countless roads. Most travelers looked away from him. Some called him dangerous. Others whispered a simple name, Strider. None of them imagined they were looking upon the same man once celebrated as Thorongil. Nor did they know they stood before the last heir of Isildur. Aragorn laughed softly. It seems every chapter of my life came with another name. Estelle, Thorongil, Strider, Elessar. They were all true. And yet, none of them alone told the whole story. He looked into the fire one final time. When I returned to Minas Tirith after the War of the Ring, I passed old soldiers whose fathers had once served beside Thorongil. Some remembered the stories, some remembered the captain himself. They never recognized the old ranger walking beside Gandalf. A warm smile crossed his face. Perhaps that was a kindness, for they remembered Thorongil exactly as he had been. Young, unknown, always riding toward the next battle. The breeze stirred the ashes. Beyond the camp, the forests of the reunited kingdom rested peacefully beneath the stars. No orc horns echoed in the distance. No black sails appeared upon the sea. For the first time in many generations, Middle-earth knew peace. Aragorn slowly rose to his feet. The years had silvered a few strands of his dark hair, but his posture remained straight. The same quiet strength that had guided Thorongil still remained. Only now it belonged to a king. Before leaving the fire, he looked once more toward the sleeping hobbits. "You know," he said with a gentle smile, "people often believe that kings are made upon the day they receive a crown. They are not. A king is made upon lonely roads, in forgotten battles, by promises kept when no one is watching. The crown merely tells the world what the journey has already made him." The fire settled into glowing embers. Above it, the stars shone as brightly as they had on the night when a young ranger first chose the name Thorongil. The Eagle of the Star had long since vanished into history, but the man who carried that name had fulfilled every lesson those wandering years had taught him, not merely by reclaiming a throne, but by becoming the kind of ruler Middle-earth had waited generations to see. And somewhere beyond the quiet camp, the white tree blossomed beneath the morning sky. Its king had finally come home.